right, here's what you can expect today. We will continue with some introductions, and then we will hear from our featured speaker. We will have a Q&A session, and then we will wrap up before the hour ends. So please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat right now if you have not already. And then I would like to poll the audience. So the featured speaker, Virgie Greb, is going to be talking about the relationship between beach quality and tourist economic activity in Galveston. So we would like to know, have you been to Galveston? If so, have you gone to the beach there? Do you swim at the beach? Do you sit at the beach? What types of activities do you like to do? Do you have a particular beach that you like to visit or a favorite place? So do let us know in the chat what your experiences are with Galveston and the beach there. Before we get started, I would like to introduce Sarah Wingfield. Sarah is our tech support today. She's giving a wave. If you have any issues during the presentation with anything related to Zoom, please send Sarah a direct chat and she can help you out. Okay, well now to set the stage, I would like to welcome from the Texas General Land Office, Jason Pinchback. Jason.
Thank you, Christina. Good morning and welcome to another installment of the Texas General Land Office Clean Coast Texas Lunch and Learn series, where we connect with coastal and water resources and learn about ways to understand and enhance the management of sustainable stormwater runoff. My name is Jason Pinchback, the Water Resources Manager at the Texas General Land Office, working under the leadership of Commissioner Don Buckingham. Today's event is sponsored by the Texas Coastal Management Program and is intended to be an easy-to-access forum where we invite subject matter experts to unpack their initiatives into bite-sized morsels, to share ideas that might be useful for neighboring coastal communities on how to improve local water quality, habitat, and related resources that support the local economies who thrive on clean coastal waters. Clean Coast Texas is here to serve communities by providing local governments, decision makers, and the public with information, resources, and tools to better manage stormwater quality and its associated runoff. The tools and guidance provided through Clean Coast Texas can help coastal communities implement measures to reduce the impact of land use change on coastal waters and to protect natural resources. Some examples of our services include community planning and ordinance development, water quality analysis, and green infrastructure workshops. These help to bring meaning and value for how to implement alternative building and planning practices. Of course, we work with grant development and project management, stormwater retrofits, and green infrastructure demonstration projects, and other related measures. To assist GLO with this initiative and knowing this type of challenge takes a team of well-seasoned and knowledgeable practitioners. The GLO formed a collaborative with Meadow Center for Water and the Environment at Texas State, Texas Community Partners at AgriLife Extension Service. By the way, they hosted a great charm workshop for the city of Hitchcock and Lamarck just yesterday, as well as Texas Sea Grant at Texas A&M. Also, we're excited to announce that Hart Research Institute at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi is joining our collaborative. We will have a formal announcement and more information at the next Lunch and Learn in November on their leadership role and other new Clean Coast Texas initiatives. So stay tuned and please attend that event. I'd like to thank Sarah Wingfield and Christina Lopez of Meadow Center and Water and the Environment for co-hosting and providing technical support for today's Lunch and Learn event. Okay, today's featured presentation is provided by Miss Virgie Greb. Virgie is a marine and coastal management and science PhD candidate at Texas A&M University, Galveston. The MCMS program is interdisciplinary and emphasizes the impacts and opportunities from the built environment and economic development, rigorous training in research methods and analytical procedures, and interdisciplinary approaches. Her dissertation research addresses the urgent need to better understand how economic activity that supports our coastal communities is related to the quality of our beaches and its waters. Her research explores the coupled issues of economics by developing the Galveston BEACH report card. And BEACH stands for Beaches, Economic Activity, and Community Health. The Beach Report Card can provide critical insights into these relationships and offer an evidence-based guide to state and local decision makers to promote sustainable economic activities along our coast. So let's buckle up, put on your thinking caps, and get ready to learn. Without any further ado, let's welcome Ms. Virgie Greb. Virgie, I can see your screen.
All right. Can you hear me now? Apologies.
Yes, I can.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jason, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you for having me today. Howdy. As you know, my name is Virgie Greb, and I'm a Marine and Coastal Management Science PhD candidate in the Department of Marine and Coastal Environmental Science at Texas A&M Galveston. I'm excited to share a bit of my dissertation research with y'all today. And thank you so much for filling out the poll at the beginning of this presentation. It really helps me gauge where the audience is. They go to the beach, all of those fun facts. So we're going to start with a brief overview of my dissertation work, and then we'll focus on one research chapter, which is exploring the relationship of Galveston beaches and hotel occupancy tax. All right, so let's talk about the environment and the economy and the motivation behind this research. Previous literature tells us that the environment and the economy have been pitted against one another in policy debates and decision-making for decades. And only recently, studies have started to explore that connection between the environment, the environmental quality, and tourist economic activity. But there are also recent empirical studies that cast doubt that economic growth is possible without damage to the environment. However, this neglects a middle ground that many scientists and the public acknowledge. It ignores that choices are not divided between the environment and the economy, rather that choices can involve both the environment and the economy, and we can work with nature. So, how does this play into our everyday lives? If we look at this on a national level, a great example of the environment and the economy working hand in hand in a balance is the growing blue economy. And that blue economy, it supports the pursuit of economic growth along environmental preservation through the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihoods, and jobs while preserving ocean ecosystem health. And this is really important because in the US, the blue economy provides about 2 million jobs, and those jobs contribute almost 4 billion to the nation's gross domestic product. So how does this affect us at a state level? So at a state level, the Texas coastline is home to approximately 25% of the population. It's about 7 million. And these communities, as you can see in the top left corner of the screen, they rely on these coastal natural resources, such as beaches, because those ecosystem services support the state's $7 billion coastal tourism industry. And the 2023 NOAA Marine Economy Report for Texas indicates that the marine economy provides about 17 billion in wages annually and adds 46 billion annually to the GDP. Now, let's look at this from a local lens here in Galveston, Texas. So the Galveston Park Board of Trustees 2023 fiscal year report indicates a record of $30.2 million in hotel occupancy tax collections. And that's a 5% increase from the previous year. And that island tourism, it broke records for the second consecutive year. It brought in about 1 billion in visitor spending in 2023, and that was about a 10% increase over the last year. So all of these combined, and also being a BOI born on the island from Galveston, this leads to the motivation for this research. I really want to explore that critical tension between the environment and the economy, and that has to be addressed by research. So, how do we balance the environment and the economy? and the components in Galveston Island. As researchers, we have to conceptualize and think about this as a social ecological system. So what is a social ecological system? A social ecological system is described as an open system consisting of ecological and social processes and components, including biomes, humans, and wildlife. So this slide illustrates the social ecological system conception, emphasizing how integrated management practice, adaptation, and resource use are those key components of a social ecological system. And those affect resilience in coastal communities as providers of provisioning, i.e. livelihoods, resource use, of regulating, which can be seen in the ecological components that help control the climate, and supporting things such as nutrient cycling and cultural, those recreation benefits associated with resource use in these ecosystem services. And this, I can say, is a challenge, and it's rarely realized. And we've seen in past literature that this is true. So we're going to discuss this a little bit later. All right, for this slide, we're going to talk a little bit about resilience. And when we talk about resilience, we're referring to Walker and Salt's definition of resilience, which is that capacity of a system to absorb disturbance and still retain its basic function and structure. And now when we go into resilience theory, we're looking at how that deals with system dynamics and envisions ecosystems as continuously changing, sometimes abruptly and unpredictably. So if we examine these social ecological systems using Big's definition, SESs are cohesive integrated systems characterized by strong connections and feedbacks within and between social and ecological components. And we acknowledge that social ecological systems are central to understanding resilience. So this figure was found in the paper, A Review of Social Ecological System Research in Geographical Applications. And it's a really good illustration of understanding that complex social ecological system, the interdependent and coupling systems that influence that analytical framework and methods that are applied to this social ecological system research. So, as I've stated before, understanding these interdependencies, it is critical because social ecological system management and policy making inherently involves making trade-offs between those ecosystem services. So the goal of my dissertation, it's to respond to this challenge. And how do we respond to that challenge? We're going to develop a monitoring framework built off successful frameworks to develop the Galveston Beach report card. As Jason said, that stands for Beaches, Economic, and Community Health. And this will be informed by public perceptions and stakeholder input that can be applied to beaches and coastal communities for that long-term assessment of beaches and water quality. And the trade-offs made in management of those social ecological systems, they broadly reflect how our natural resources are viewed as goods by stakeholders. And those stakeholders, they're you, they're me, they're residents, they're visitors, they're businesses, nonprofits, anyone with an interest and concern about our beaches. So the overall goal of this research project is to create that report card, and it'll be a public-facing report card. It's going to be a great decision-making resource. We're going to do this by tracing the state of and connections between Galveston Island's natural environment, which are those beaches, waters, natural environment, and the economy, which we're looking at through a lens of tourist-related activity, and public health. So for that, we're looking at perceptions and outcomes from a social survey. Specifically, this project has the following objectives: to analyze the relationship between beach quality and tourist economic activity and identify the association of this relationship. And that will allow us to determine if environmental quality drives tourist economic activity and if tourism degrades environmental activity. So here we are, Galveston Island, our little island in the sun. Galveston is a perfect test bed for this dissertation research. The island is about 32 miles long. All of that is public beach area. It's along the coast of Texas, averaging about 2 miles in width. And I selected Galveston, not just because I'm from here, but because of the tight coupling of that beach environment and local economy that relies so heavily on tourism. And the tourism economy, that depends on the beach environment. So that includes factors such as how is the water quality? How is the shoreline erosion? Is there a beach that we can recreate on? Is it just rocks at the seawall? And we also want to look at the biodiversity. Is this a healthy beach area? So all of these are also affected by upstream urbanization and tourism activity. So we have beach management practices here on the island, and those beach management practices by the Coastal Zone Management Team, they attempt to mediate the negative impact of environmental resource use while also adapting the natural environment for maximizing that economic benefit through, for example, say the construction of beach amenities. And all of this and more collectively affects the health and well-being of Galveston Island, residents and visitors. So again, we're going to look at these research objectives, and what we're going to do is focus on empirical analysis number one, and that's that statistical analysis of the relationship between the Galveston beach water quality and hotel occupancy tax. So this will begin unpacking the Galveston Island Beach social ecological system by exploring that connection between environmental quality and the economy, which is research objective one. And this is just a slide to kind of indicate what is that relationship? What is that association between beach quality and tourist economic activity? So how do we do this? This is the fun part. So to test this, tourist economic activity is measured by hotel occupancy tax, known as HOT. And that data is collected for what we used for this regression was 59 hotels that are located in the study area. And so the data for this measure, we obtained that from the Galveston Park Board of Trustees for the time period of 2016 to 2022. Now, HOT, what is HOT? HOT is the portion of state tax collected and returned to a community for the purpose of cleaning, maintaining public beaches and shorelines within the municipality. And according to the Texas tax code, hotel occupancy tax is 15% and is applied to all gross revenue fees associated with occupying and renting the property for occupancy. Now, of that 15%, 9% is paid to Galveston and 6% to the state of Texas. And Texas law dictates that Galveston can only use that HOT revenue for convention and hotel industry and proceeds that may only be spent on projects or events that result in visitors coming to the island, staying overnight in the community, and generating more HOT occupancy tax. So you may have heard this phrase before, heads and beds. And the park board is authorized by the city council here in Galveston to collect that HOT revenue on a monthly or quarterly basis at that rate of 9%. And we also use the Consumer Price Index from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That was used to account for inflation, to measure the average change over time in prices paid by consumers. It measures inflation as experienced by consumers in their day-to-day living. So, how did we clean this data? This took a little bit of time, and it was a great puzzle for my mind. So let's talk about cleaning it. The HOT data, it was categorized into 6 groups, and those 6 groups are listed here: bed and breakfast, hotel full service, hotels limited service, management companies, multi-property independents, and independents. So those are a lot of categories. So what we had to do, this HOT revenue was collected by various agencies between 2015 and 2022. So it was collected by another agency before the park board started collecting this HOT tax. So what we had to do was develop a method to analyze these multiple years of data. Each had different collection styles. So in order to do this, we just focused on two categories for this analysis, and that's the hotel full service and hotel limited service. So what we did then, we aligned those hotel names across years and consolidated the data for consistency. And this is why collaboration is so important. And the Park Board has been a major supporter of this research and so easy to work with and very patient answering all of our questions. So again, this hot data, it wasn't designed for a regression analysis. That's why we had to develop a method to analyze those multiple years of data with those different collection styles. So our next variable is water quality, and we measured this by the fecal bacteria, that enterococcus collected from 39 water quality stations located in the study area. And those are monitored by Texas Beach Watch. So if you watched Lucy Flores's presentation, you learned all about Texas Beach Watch and the wonderful things that they do. And I thank them for sharing this data with us. So some years vary. More stations were added throughout the years. I think there was 37 previously, and now there's 39. So those water quality samples, what we did, since the General Land Office goes out at different periods during the year, what we did was we took all of those water quality samples and grouped them by seasons so that we could identify trends over time. And all of these little blue flags are where water quality stations are throughout the island. And just to point out for the hotel occupancy tax, these gold little hotel icons are where the 59 hotels are located on the island that we used for this analysis. All right, we also looked at beach widths. So we measured those beach widths annually by the distance from the mean high water mark to the nearby hotels, those 59 hotels. We also looked at fixed points, such as the 3 nautical mile marker, the continental shelf boundary, so those could serve as constants. And the process of organizing and cleaning this data required significant time and collaboration, including expert input from Dr. Retchelis at TAMUG. Thank you very much, Dr. Retchelis. The beach width data, that was collected from multiple sources and was then carefully organized into shape files. So these shape files, those are crucial for visualizing changes in beach width over time, allowing for the analysis of erosion impacts and the effects of beach replenishment projects. For years where we had missing data, we utilized data from previous years to fill in those gaps and maintain consistency. So the city of Galveston has an annual beach survey every year, measuring the mean high water mark, 4-foot contour, a multitude of different points. And unfortunately, there was no data for the year of 2018. So we just filled that in for consistency. And this data cleaning process, it was essential for ensuring accuracy and consistency, and it involved quite a few steps. And I'd like to highlight this insert here. This is the Babes Beach area, and it's a great example because this is where Babes Beach is located. So this was a renourishment project, and you can see the lines from 2015 versus 2020 and how much the beach width has grown within that time. So the last variable we looked at beach access points and features. And this study, we included beach amenities data for 42 beach access points within the designated study area. And these access points, they're spaced at half-mile intervals with data. We use the data from the General Land Office to pinpoint these beach access points on our map. And we also reference key resources such as the City of Galveston's Beach Access and Dune Protection Plan, the Texas Land Office's Texas Coast website, and the Galveston Park Board of Trustees information plan to gather details of these beach access point amenities and features. And that data set, it covers over 40 categories of beach amenities, including lifeguard stations, parking availability, on and off beach parking, associated fees, zoning, ADA access, public restrooms, showers, and more. And a very notable example we can see is here, these half-mile marks. This is the end of the seawall where we have the highest rate of erosion. And then you can see the half-mile mark here is Delanera, on to the next and on to the next. So how did we do this? What did we do once we had all of these variables? So we selected a model and the preliminary analysis of the data due to the large sample size of that hot revenue and bacteria count. So that panel data, it follows the same data over time, year, month, and can estimate those effects of water quality on hot techs, or it can estimate the relationship between water quality and hot techs revenues, that association. So with this model, we don't have to measure every single aspect. The regression captures everything that is time invariant. And those time invariant variables are variables that have values that don't change over time. And this model explicitly accounts for that. And that benefits us. The advantage of this model, it allows us to accommodate that time invariant heterogeneity. So those time invariant variables, those differences across hotels, for example, the size of hotels, the management style, those fixed amenities that hotels offer, we don't need to explicitly mention these because the model allows us to control for many observables, marketing strategies, etc. All those things that hotels provide. And that panel of data with the fixed effects model, it also allows us to account for seasonal effects and dynamics of the entire industry over time that is not hotel specific. So for example, some of you may remember 2014, the summer of seaweed. It also accounts for time periods such as the pandemic. This model that allows us to count for those years and specific variables that change over time. Things that impact everyone. What else can I say about this? So with this model, we recognize the issue of reverse causation in the analysis, which is why we explored that use of instrumental variables, those beach width, beach amenities, things of that nature, to address this challenge. So our goal was to identify an instrumental variable that is correlated with fecal bacteria levels, but uncorrelated with revenue. We weren't able to find a suitable instrument, so what we did, we opted to use that fixed effects model I was talking about. And we use the fixed effects as a method to account for those time invariant, unobserved factors. And while the fixed effects, it doesn't eliminate bias, but it helps control for many omitted variables that could influence both revenue and fecal bacteria concentrations. So it is important to acknowledge the potential for similarity bias in identifying those relationships. So for this reason, we refer to the results as associations rather than causal effects in this presentation. So now, what does this analysis tell us now that we've talked about what model we used? So what this analysis reveals about the association of beach quality and tourist economic activity in Galveston, when we examine it, we regressed the dependent variable, hotel occupancy tax revenue against bacteria counts when we obtained, and when we did that, we obtained this coefficient you see right here. And this suggests an inverse relationship between bacteria levels. So we see that the coefficient, it tells us that a 1% increase in average bacteria counts are associated with this negative 0.0251% decrease in average tax revenues. Okay, so what does that mean? If bacteria is high, hot revenue association is low. So what else does this tell us? How do we interpret these regression results? What do we want to know? So when we looked at this, when we looked at the seasonal bacteria count averages, that average was 53. And while that average real tax revenue estimate, we adjusted that using that consumer price index. And that was a total of 25,000 roundabout. So to further understand the significance of these figures, we'll explore how these values have changed over time and compare them to identify any trends, any patterns. And so again, looking at that average, that 53, the graph illustrates that seasonal change, those seasonal changes for each year. And those highlight those key events such as the COVID-19 pandemic in 2019. We also have the subsequent end of the quarantine, and then we have years with impacts from storms, all of which influence these trends. So what did we look at next? Next, we looked at that annual tax average. So we calculated the average annual tax average for each season, with the overall seasonal average being 25,050. And this graph illustrates that seasonal change for each year. Again, it's highlighting those key events such as the COVID-19 pandemic in 2019, the end of the quarantine, and again, those impacts from storms, hurricanes, all of those that can influence these trends. And there we see the average. So looking at the average high and max seasonal bacteria by season for each time period listed, we can estimate the loss in hot revenue. So we can calculate this monthly per hotel, annually per hotel, and then the total, which includes the 59 hotels. And as you can see, this is a conservative estimate because we are only looking at those two categories. We're not including Airbnbs, we're not including bed and breakfast, short-term rentals, etc. So you can imagine how much larger these numbers would be if we were accounting for all of the entities that the park board collects hot revenue for. So again, we saw in our analysis that the average bacteria for a season was 53. And when we look at that, how does that impact a hotel per month? And this is just one hotel. It's about $600. And if we look at that annually, it's about $7,000. But if we look at that for the 59 hotels, we get a much larger number here, which is about $450,000. And you can go through when we look at the high seasonal, the differences that it makes, the max seasonal, and we have quite a large number here. So I ran just a few descriptive data points here. And what we're showing in this table, this illustrates how many water quality stations had a bacteria count higher than 104 CFU. And that's when the Galveston County Health District, Texas Beach Watch, all put out those advisories saying it's not the best time to swim right now, to avoid swimming, because those bacteria levels are higher. So you have a better chance of getting a stomach virus, things, pink eye, things of that nature. So when you look at this, for the year 2015, we have a total of 154 water quality stations measuring over 104 CFU, which is when you get an advisory. And we can see that the month of May in 2015 was quite high, and the month of June 30 water quality stations had higher than 104 CFU. So this can, again, show us some trends, what was happening in 2015 versus 2018, 2020 during the pandemic, and try to understand what this is telling us. And when we look at this again, we can also see for the year 2015, this was a very high month, and we had this total. So I also just wanted to show quickly the water quality station descriptive data. So this shows us each water quality station with a sample that was higher than that 104 CFU, which is when you get the beach advisory to avoid swimming. And this tells us which water quality station, the frequency and percent of these stations having that measure of over 104 CFU. And what we're going to do with this in the future, which you can see in the dissertation and some future presentations, is map those specific water quality stations so that we can see the location, what's happening over time, those trends. Now, to wrap this up, what is the significance of this? Why are we doing this? Why do I want to study bacteria that's in the water and hotel revenue? I really want to do this to help us understand coastal social ecological systems and how we can improve them for the community, which will also help us improve that system resilience that we need when we have impacts from storms, hurricanes, things of that nature. And what we gain from this study, it's going to help state, regional, and local officials in their decision making so that they can maximize the economic benefits of those clean and safe beaches, since they rely on each other. And it's also going to provide a comprehensive assessment of Galveston's environmental quality and tourist economic activity, focusing on those beach environments and public health. That way we have this long-term assessment of the Gulf side of the island and what's happening with our water quality, what's happening with our beaches. How are those vibrant beaches being affected? Is there an association between seasonal tourism, things of that nature? And here we have some references, and I'd like to thank the many, many agencies and people that have helped out with this research, from the Galveston County Health District, the Park Board, Visit Galveston, the lifeguards, the city, the General Land Office, Beach Watch, the Institute for Disaster Resilient Texas, A&M, and especially my graduate committee, my graduate chair, Dr. Ashley Ross, Dr. Mary, who's an economist, Dr. Kara Pennell, who works in public health at UTMB, Dr. Wesley Highfield, who is a big help with GIS, and Dr. David Hollett in marine biology, who studies toxicology. So with that being said, I won't go on and talk about how wonderful Galveston is because I'm from here, and encourage you to come to the beach. I will leave it open for questions, and my contact info is for you right here in the bottom square. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being patient. I know we had to reschedule a few times due to some coastal hazards, which tells us I'm in a great place to study these things. So thank you again for your time. Hope to see you on the beach.
Thank you so much, Virgie. That was a fantastic presentation. There's a lot to unpack here. I know we'll have some questions and comments, so if you have those, please include those in chat, and we will go to those in just a second. I wanted to kick us off here, and this is so complex in what you're presenting and trying to tease out. And I can only imagine that you had a lot of surprises and twists and turns in your research, but I was wondering if you could maybe share one of the surprises or findings that you weren't expecting throughout the study, and share those if something you haven't covered already.
Sure. So this has been a labor of love. A little background, I worked in coastal resources for the city of Galveston for several years, and then decided to come to A&M Galveston for this PhD program because what I could see from my background is we have hotel occupancy tax, but I wasn't seeing it used anywhere to measure, is there an association with that? And also with our beach environment, because the coastal zone management team, it does a great job of going out and cleaning the beach and keeping those beaches clean, but they are paid through that hotel occupancy tax. So they heavily rely on each other. So I would to see through the seasons how are different areas of the beach impacted so that we could see, is it construction? Is it annual rainfall? How are the beaches being impacted? Is it tourism? So what was really surprising to me when doing this research was seeing how Galveston was still quite busy even during a pandemic because everyone was going to the beach and going outside, which also means you're still going to need your crews to be on the beach. And you can see that in this seasonal bacteria count averages. And again, we broke that up into seasons so that we could identify some of these trends and look and see. So for 2021, it was high in the spring. Now, could that be due when we look at things like spring break or what was going on in the spring of 2021? So just really looking at the influences and associations. I've learned a lot about the relationship between that economic and environmental relationship and how a balance is something that is needed so that we can continue to have these vibrant coastal beach areas and in the same time encourage that tourism in a way where we're working together, not against each other.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for unpacking that a little bit. I would like to turn it over to Christina to help us facilitate our Q&A and comments.
Thank you. All right, we have several questions. If you have a question, go ahead and place that in the chat so we can get to it. But the first one is there a standard report card that communities can use?
So, great question. I had the privilege and opportunity to work at the Heal the Bay in Santa Monica, and they had a report card. And I was able to see the impacts that it made in the community of people taking ownership of certain areas of the beach and really working to help keep them clean, improve the water quality. And now that report card goes from California all the way to Mexico. When I moved back to Texas, I had the opportunity to work at the Galveston Bay Foundation. And the Galveston Bay Foundation has a wonderful Galveston Bay report card. So we're looking at indicators on the Bay side, but not the Gulf side. And that report card was instrumental in helping people take an initiative to help keep the bays in a healthy, so that we have our marshes, which are so important and things of that nature. But for here, what I was relying on and looking at the most was the Texas Beach Watch site. And that's through the GLO, and that shows the fecal content. So we're measuring the fecal content, which is mandated by the EPA. So the state measures throughout the entire coast, all of these water quality stations, and we have that existing data that we can use. So the goal of this is to create a report card utilizing the existing data and information and put it into a report card that's digestible for anyone to understand. How is the beach environment here? What is the water quality? How are they doing since last year? Was the water quality in a C, now it's an A, and really help people understand the very nuanced dynamic relationship between the environment and the economy, and also to know that that we can work together for those vibrant coastlines. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second. I have so many thoughts running at the same time.
Sure.
But I hope that answered your question.
I believe so, yes. Thank you. Okay, next question is regarding your data set. Could you comment on bacteria and hot data for the month of January? Is it in there?
Sure, let's see.
Thank you. So I believe this question might have been asked when you were back a little bit, and I'll stop you when you get there. It was the first time you showed the regression results.
Oh.
Bacteria sampling. Yeah, I think this one.
Oh, okay.
I believe so. But Tom Douglas, please correct me. Yeah, so is January included in that? I think that is the question.
It should be.
And I think that further down too, whenever you showed the descriptive data, just those tables, the months were labeled numerically. And so, yeah, that slide too. I don't know if 1 equals to January. I don't know.
I believe so. Yeah, because this is the year, the month. Yes, it does have January. I'm just trying to remember the numerical way. Because this is December, this is February. I'll have to get back to you on that, and I can send you a message via email to send out.
Great, thank
But
you. Are you ready for the next question?
Sure, yes, thank you.
Great. So the next question asks, have you compared the bacteria count with rainfall?
Great question. So the fixed effects model, it takes in all of that as well. It accounts for average temperature, average rainfall, things of that nature. Because originally I had wanted to use the NOAA precipitation and things of that nature, but it's already included in that fixed effects model. It accounts for those things.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, this next question asks, does bacterial sampling incorporate source tracking to determine if wildlife has had an impact on the counts? And then they go on to say that they were at a presentation in Milwaukee this summer, and several years ago, they discovered that seagulls pooping on the beach was the main source of bacteria. And they actually responded by coming up with a program to rake the beach more frequently to expose the bacteria to sunlight to reduce count. So could you comment on the inclusion of any bacteria source tracking?
That is a great question. And I would like to point back to Kara Lee's research with Dr. Gentry, who presented last month. And they worked with the General Land Office with Jason and Lucy. And they did find that there was a higher percentage of seagull poo rather than human. And I don't know if Jason, you want to comment on Carolee's research a little bit more since you worked with them, but I found that fascinating because I think it's really important when you're talking about these fecal bacteria measures and you have all the news crews out on the beach and the seawall talking about there's poo in the water. It would be great to know that it's not all just human, because we've done some surveys and people are a bit confused or misinformed about what they're actually swimming in. So I found that fascinating.
Sure thing, Virgie. Yes. So I guess the quick answer is that yes, wildlife does impact bacteria as well as domestic pets. Anything with hair, fur, and feathers. And we'll throw dolphins into that category as well. It's certainly something we're very much interested in learning more about, and we've been working with Dr. Gentry and his team over there for the last couple of years. Some of the preliminary results that we've received does indicate that we have predominantly seagull, followed by canine, actually followed by coyote, and then canine, and then human. As far as the sources, those are pretty much some of the only sources that we looked at. So it's a fairly narrow scope. We're exploring right now how to expand that and to make it more comprehensive in the future. So please stay tuned. And that's really interesting with the relationship with seaweed or sargassum and that rack line, that many studies have pointed often to the sargassum or rack lines, as they're known elsewhere in the country, as helping to harbor and then reproduce bacteria. Very interested.
Thank you. I do like their response too about breaking the beach rather than trying to manage the seagulls themselves. I don't think that would go over very well. All right, next question. Can we use this data to predict when bacteria counts will be high? Right now, the alerts are issued after the fact because it takes a time to collect and analyze the water samples. And it would be great to pre-warn folks about impaired water quality before they go to the beach.
Oh, that's a great question. What I like to share with people is when it rains, wait at least 3 days before you go in the water, because that's when everything is mixing and you have everything coming to Galveston beaches. We're at the bottom of the watershed. So everything from Dallas makes its way here to us. All the urban runoff, it either goes to the beach or the bay. So you would be swimming in that. And the purpose of this research is to be able to predict those future trends. So if we start seeing, say, around March, when spring break is, we know we're going to have higher fecal concentrations, or we know during the wet seasons, we're going to have higher fecal concentrations. As we continue this research, it'll be able to help us predict those future trends so that we can adapt. What can we do so that we're still maximizing that economic and environmental balance?
If I may add on to that, certainly forecasting or predicting bacteria is very much of interest to all of us in the community of practice. We also have to understand that there are literally tens of thousands of factors impacting the bacteria. With that being said, we are currently working with Philemon Guillermo out of Texas A&M Corpus Christi. He's using AI and machine learning to help us gain insights. We are a solid year into that project, and we think it's going to at least take another year, if not a little bit more, but we're very interested in sharing some of that data and results in a future Lunch and Learn.
Well, Virgie, I will say you are receiving some compliments in the chat, so be sure to check that out before you go. But the last question that we have, they also say, very nice presentation. Have you considered comparing the estimated hotel revenue loss to the total revenue per year? I would be interested in the percent reduction of revenue.
That's very interesting and great. Thank you for bringing that up. Dr. Barry and I are actually meeting next week because we have a lot of ideas and other research and regressions that we want to run. We're also looking at some things of looking at zip codes to see how far people are traveling to be here so that we can look at the price of gas and how much people are spending to get here, things of that nature. So yes, potentially we will be looking at those percentages as well. And thank you for bringing that up. That's a great point.
Awesome. There's always more work to be done. Sometimes you end up with more questions than answers. Well, those are all the questions from the chat. Thank you, Virgie.
Oh, fantastic. I'll go ahead and stop my share. Thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about this research and just how great it's been to collaborate with everyone.
Virgie, we really do appreciate you spending your time with us today and sharing your expertise. We're excited about the next steps, and I think your dissertation, when it's available, is going to be of high degree of interest. So I hope you have it bound and ready to sell through some of the bookstores or wherever that's going to be at. We'll stay tuned for that when it comes. We'd like to thank Christina Lopez and Sarah Wingfield at Texas State University Meadows Center for Water and the Environment for hosting our event today. And we'd also like to thank and acknowledge our collaborators, the Texas Community Watershed Partners, Texas Sea Grant, and of course, Texas Coastal Management Program. We have some exciting announcements to come and some new changes to Clean Coast Texas Collaborative in this next year. So stay tuned for announcements in our next Lunch and Learn series, which might be maybe a month or 6 weeks from now. So we'll have that announcement coming out soon. And we will have a wrap-up presentation that basically is going to bring together this series of lunch and learns over this last year, tie them all together and talk about water quality and what we're doing moving forward to better manage sustainable stormwater. Thank you so much. We appreciate you for coming and joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time.